Yeah, hello everyone. First, I want to invite the students for this initial course, foundation course. And I hope to introduce you a topic which you would all be liking it because either it's a DM student or PhD student. At some time during your thesis work, you have to write research papers. You have to understand how to do research in a more meaningful and ethical way. I'll be introducing you a topic which is professional ethics in research. So I'll try to cover briefly some of the main aspect of ethics in human research and animal research, and most of my part will be focused on the ethics which is involved in publication of research. So to start with, what is research ethics? So research ethics involves the application of fundamental ethical principles to plan, conduct, and publish research. So you need to understand the ethics, how to plan the research, how to conduct it, either in humans, animals, and finally how to publish. Because without publication of your research, it doesn't have meaning because it doesn't have any implication in public health. So why research ethics is needed? So one of the most important reason why you need to have ethics is that it is good for your own research. You need to know how it is a good way to do a research, to perform an experiment, what is the ethical way to do it. Because if you're not ethical enough to do your own research, your results may be erroneous because you're not following the protocols or the principles which are needed to perform a good research. So that is a very important thing. So knowledge generation itself requires your ethical contribution. Now, the second important thing is that it promotes value of essential collaboration. So if you want to discuss to your colleague, your PhD student in one department or a DM student in another department, and they want to discuss there's something interesting they found in a patient or in their experiments. So first, they have to be relying on each other. You don't want to talk to someone whom you think can take away your data, publish it in his name. So there is a trust which has to be developed in research, and that promotes collaboration. So he need not be a friend of yours, but he must be holding an integrity in the field of science. So that's very important when you go and talk, you share your ideas to someone. So that is a very important thing in which research ethics is important. The third is it must accountable to the public. So whatever you do, if you don't do it ethically, your results may not hold any scientific value. You may be able to publish them, but then again, they are not reproducible, and that shakes the public opinion about research as such. And finally, if you work ethically, it builds up support for research. The government is happy that the public money which is being poured into your research is giving something meaningful and it is reproducible. So it is something which is true. So that is why research ethics is so much needed. So what are the ethical principles guiding the planning and execution of the project? So first, we'll start with some of the basic concept in planning of human ethical projects. So the ethics involved in doing human experiments. So there were many reports initially. It started in the middle of 1990s of the Second World War when this principle of ethics really gained momentum in human research. So one of the most important report which came out was the Belmont report, and which had three important concepts. The first was respect for a person. So what is respect for a person? So whenever you recruit a patient's individual for study, you have to respect their autonomy. So you cannot impose your study on a group of your patient. You have to take their consent. So the choice of the person is very important in doing clinical research. And people who are not capable of making their decision, they should be consulted with people who can make decision for them. And it should be a voluntary exercise by the patient. And you should make the patient understand the cause and consequences of this research before the study is started and also during the progression of the study. It's not like you tell him in the starting and then you don't tell him when the execution is being followed on. So this is an important principle in doing research in humans. The second important is beneficence. So beneficence is something which is very important, and it relies on that any human research should be for the benefit of a person. So it should not do any harm. So the benefit should outweigh the potential harm which research might do to the patient. So this is a very important thing, and there are some instances when there is a conflict between the two things, which is the autonomy and beneficence, and they're a little bit tricky things for clinicians sometimes to which one should be considered. But at least these are two of the most important things. And then the third important thing is justice. So you cannot do a research at the expense of one population. So you give the benefits of the research to another population, and you do an experiment on one population. So it should be justice to individuals or a population at large, and it should the fruits of the research should be evenly distributed between the populations. So it is justice to the subjects, which is very much needed in human research. So these three important points form the pillar of human research. Now, something on which may be interesting to the PhD students, and that is people working on animal-based research. So, like human research is important, and we know that humans are important, so we have to have ethical consideration. But it is equally important to have ethical consideration in doing animal research, and that is something which many people don't respect that much. And there have been a lot of controversies that whether we should do animal research or should not do. But besides, while the controversies are still there, it is an unavoidable fact that animal research has accelerated the development of medicines, vaccines, surgical techniques, and many progression which has been made in fundamental scientific understanding. So we do need animals. They are not humans, but they form the first step before any clinical trials in humans are done. So the progression of a clinical trial is always through in basic sciences through in vitro studies. But ultimately, if you have to see a holistic effect of your compound or research at a physiological level, you have to go to animal models, and only after having some positive effects in animal systems you can go to the clinical trial. So there is a need for animals, but at the same time we have to have respect for animals, and there are some guidelines which are now being followed all over the world, that how animal research should be executed. And basically there are three R's which are there in the animal research. So the three R's replacement. So if there is a truly a need to do animal work, you should do it. But if there are some ways in which it can be done in silico or through computer modeling, there should be a justification to do that, and it should be promoted. So if you really need an animal, then definitely you have to do animal work. But if there are ways to do that, to get around that using in silico approaches, it should be promoted. And this is something which have been introduced in schools, and in some cases in which computer modeling is equally as good in educating students about animal organs, the physiology, and other things. So replacement is a good thing. If you cannot replace, then at least the focus should be on reduction. So you have to use you don't have to indiscriminately sacrifice animals. You have to use some good statistical method in which you get enough power in your experiment to reduce a meaningful result, and at the same time reduce the number of animals you use. So nowadays the studies have to be statistically proven to justify that if the number of animals you require for your experiment is appropriate or not. So reduction is another second step if replacement cannot be done. And finally, if the one thing which is important is the refinement. So if you cannot replace, and in some way you still need a lot of animals, then at least you should have some policies or strategies to reduce the suffering of animals during the intervention studies. So during the sacrifice or during the in vivo experiments, if there are some ways in which the pain could be reduced in animals, that is something which is to be considered while doing animal work. And a detailed presentation for this will be given by Dr. Barnwal during when you go through your annual courses. So now one of the important thing which I feel that is very important and which is lacking during the PhD period is what are the ethics in research publications. So when a student first start writing a paper or is given by his mentor to write a review article or a research paper, he he's totally ignorant about the way in which a research article is written. Most of the time you are attracted to use you go through some big review article by big authors and you try to take away some part of it and put it in your paper. So because you're new, you don't know that these are unethical policies. So I think this presentation will go roughly around these things and what are the ethical policies when you do when you write a research paper and what are the journals looking for. So the first important thing is about the authorship. So according to the recent guidelines of the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, the four criteria which are a must to be credited as an author is the author should have substantial contribution to the study conception and design, data acquisition, analysis, and interpretation. Secondly, drafting or revising the article for intellectual content, approval of the final version, and agreement to be accountable for all the aspects of the work related to the accuracy or integrity of the part of work. So, if you put somebody as an author, these are something in which he should be ticked right. So, he should qualify in these four things, and then only the authorship is guaranteed. So, I've taken these very good source. This source is ethics at elsevier.com. So I'll encourage you to go through this. This is a very good guideline laid by Elsevier, and you should go through it deeply. I'm touching only briefly some of the concept, but this is very important when you give authorship and other parts of the research publication ethics. So one of the grave mistakes people sometimes do is that they miss out authors. So generally, you have seen corrigendums or even retraction of papers when the corresponding author miss the name of a very important person who had contributed significantly to the work. And it may be by mistake or it may be intentional. But if that person sees the research and he writes to the editor of the journal, you may have to retract your paper or do a corrigendum and include his name. So you have to be very careful when you write the author list of any research article. So misrepresenting a scientist's relation to the work is the category in which you have to understand the importance of putting authors who really contributed in all those four criteria should be there in the final manuscript. And your manuscript should be sent to all the authors to approve it. And this should in the final manuscript should include the author list and the sequence of the author. So all the authors should be should agree with the corresponding authors way of putting the authors, and if there is any doubt, they should clear with the corresponding author. Now, another important thing is the ghost authorship. Now, this is something in which you people give their manuscripts to be written by professional writers. There are some companies and professional writers which do it. So you don't have to put their name as in the author, but you definitely need to acknowledge them. So this is unethical if you don't acknowledge the professional author which has written your manuscript. So this is an important aspect. And the third important aspect is the gift and the guest authorship. So gift authorship is like in a department you have a good friend, so you just want to impress him or other things. You just put his name, although he may not be involved directly or indirectly in your study. So this is called a gift authorship, and this is unethical in terms of the guideline laid by the journal. And if there is any of this gift authorship, you should discuss with the journal editor before submitting your manuscript. And now, what is the guest authorship? So, guest authorship is people generally put name of some big shots in the field. so that the chances of the acceptance of the paper is increased. This sometimes happens in research, and this is also considered as unethical. And you should not use the name of your seniors or the big shots just to get your paper accepted. So these are the unethical issues involved in publications. Now, another important thing is competing interests. So when an investigator, author, editor, or reviewer has a financial personal interest or belief that could affect his or her objectivity or inappropriately influence his or her actions, a potential competing interest exists. Such relationships are also known as dual commitments, competing interests, or competing loyalties. So, like for example, a paper comes to you for review, and you know that person is a very close friend of yours, or you have published a paper with him in the last 5 years. So you should ethically declare that to the journal, that your judgment may be influenced by your closeness to that person. So that is one thing which ideally people should do, and disclose any personal relationship with the author, which as a reviewer, if you get a manuscript. The second important thing is that if you're writing a paper and you have a link with a pharmaceutical industry or any industry which is funding this research, or you have some commitment there. So that should be disclosed in the starting of the submission. And this is something, a guideline, which is now routinely followed by all of the journals. So you have to declare that there is no competing interest in the study. And this is a very important thing, because if it is found out that you are working for that company, or you are influenced by the company or any way which is describing this research, it may cause a retraction in your study. So that is an important aspect. Now, one of the most important aspects which the students routinely do this fault is plagiarism. Now, one of the most common type of publication misconduct is plagiarism, and when an author deliberately uses another's work without permission, credit, or acknowledgement. Plagiarism takes different forms, from literal copying to paraphrasing someone else's work, and can include data, word, and phrases, and ideas and concepts. So there are four type of classes of plagiarism. First is literally copying from somebody else's manuscript. So it's reproducing a work word by word, in whole or in a part, without permission and acknowledgement from the original source. So it is unethical, and you should there are ways in which nowadays the journals themselves track this using plagiarism softwares, or your institute, you can make use of your institute's resources if they have subscription for these softwares, so that to see whether you intentionally or unintentionally took a lot of text word by word from other manuscripts or reviews. So this is considered as unethical by journals, and you may be asked to revise it, or worst case scenario, if it is already published, you may be asked to retract your paper. Okay, so other than literal copying, there is another class which is substantial copying. So you're not copying the whole manuscript as such, but you do take parts from different sections of the of someone else's paper. So and you do it, and this is unethical if you do it without acknowledging or quoting that original person or paper which described this for the first time. So this is also unethical. The important is the paraphrasing. This is not as grave a fault as the first two, but definitely paraphrasing does not mean that it is ethical to just copy paste with just changing some of the tense and the words. So if you're taking something, you're inspired to use a sentence or paragraph from another person's work, you have to cite the original reference. So paraphrasing is acceptable if the original reference is cited, and if there are some sentences which are literally taking from those original manuscripts, you have to put them in quotes and cite the original work. So this is a minor but still important important thing we have to understand. Now, another thing is text recycling, is that it is a concept of what many students do, is that they is a self-plagiarism. So you just uh, take your own old manuscript and you rewrite in some way and submit it as a new publication. So as a new submission. So this is self-plagiarism is also a great problem, and it is considered unethical. So if you're just recycling your old published work, it is unethical, and you have to cite it that this was already shown. Most people hide this thing to get a new publication, but this is considered unethical. So text recycling is not permitted in research publication. So another important aspect in research publication ethics is simultaneous submission. So there are some cases in which authors have an obligation to make sure. So authors do submit the same manuscript in different journals at the same time. So this is considered simultaneous publication. So intentionally submitting or resubmitting work for duplicate publication is considered as a breach of publication ethics. So if you have a work which is ready for publication, you cannot send it to all the journals in your area at once. So the criteria is that you first submit to first journal. If it is rejected, then you send to another journal. Okay. So simultaneous submission is submitting a paper or two or to two or more journals at the same time. And duplicate publication is when an author submit a paper or portion of his her own work which has been previously published to another journal without disclosing prior submission. So it is something you get your paper accepted somewhere, and before it is print, you submit the same paper to another journal. So that is a duplicate publication. It is considered unethical because it just give a false opinion that this work has been reproduced many times, although in true sense it was just a single study which has been published twice. So it is considered unethical. And duplication by paraphrasing is the same thing, is the same problem, that you use the same words of your own publication in different submissions. So that is also unethical. And translation of paper published in another language. So suppose a publication was in German and you just translate it into English and submit it. This is considered unethical unless you take permission from the original publisher. So there are cases in which you are allowed to translate the manuscript and publish as a new manuscript, but those are rare things which happen. And so next is research fraud. So research fraud is publishing data or conclusions that were not generated by the experiment or observation, but were inventions or data manipulations. There are two kinds of research and scientific there are two kinds in research and scientific publication. The first is fabrication. So fabrication is making up research data and results and recording or reporting them. So you actually make up things which never existed. So you make a false uh, like a graph or something for which you never did that experiment. So this is called fabrication. And falsification is which when you manipulate your data. So you play with the statistics, you remove outliers, and you try to make your paper look very clean and actually fitting perfectly in your hypothesis. So this is called falsification. So the two type of fabrications and falsification are major concern in publication, and these are serious ethical issues which drastically lower the reputation of the scientist. So there are, to some extent, it is allowed to affect the data with the original data, but you have to disclose in your publication, or you have to follow the journal guideline to what extent you can change the image quality of your experiments or other plots and other things. And definitely fabrication is not allowed. Manipulation is allowed only if you follow the journal guideline and it's not considered extreme manipulation, so that the original data itself cannot be matched with your change data. So like brightness, contrast, and things, you have to follow the journal guideline to what extent they allow that. Okay, so that is an important thing which is rigorously, and these things are generally caught after publication, and this cause a lot of problem for the integrity of the researcher and the institute. So this has to be very much taken into concern. Another concept which is important in publication and which is routinely seen is called salami slicing. So this is a concept which actually is the slicing of research that would form one meaningful paper into several different papers. So it's a big study, and it's and but under some reason that you need to have more papers, or you just want to increase your citation, you just divide into very small studies and publish it. The subjects and the hypothesis experiments are all the same. So actually, is the same study with a little bit modification to get different a lot of papers from it. So nowadays, it's also considered as unethical by a lot of journals, and so breaking up or segmenting data from single study and creating different manuscript is considered unethical, because it gives a false indication that these studies have been repeated many times, although it's still a single study, and it gives undue it causes a duplication of results. So it is, and it also wastes the time of peer reviewers. So it's also an unethical practice in research publication. So with this, I want to thank, and if you have any other questions regarding this, please let me know.